Our movie begins with a couple who are deeply in love, named Sarah and Jackson. They're sitting together in a bar watching videos, and we learn that they first met on the island of Mauritius during a vacation. They spent a whole year together filled with adventures. Today is their last day together because Sarah is flying to London tomorrow to start her new job. She asks Jackson to come with her to London, but he decides to stay on the island because he loves the atmosphere and feels happy there. Jackson goes to get Sarah a drink, and in that moment she decides to leave without saying goodbye because she hates emotional farewells. Jackson comes back and searches for her everywhere, but she has completely disappeared. After a full year, Sarah decides to return to Mauritius to attend the wedding of her close friend Bakan. She feels happy to get away from work stress. She goes to stay at the house of an acquaintance named Suleiman. When she enters the house, she doesn't find anyone, and suddenly a dog appears and tries to attack her. She quickly tries to climb over the wires, and luckily the owner of the house comes out to move the wedding drink crates. When he sees her, he rescues her from the dog. A little later, Sarah meets her friend Bakan and some of their old friends, and they start celebrating together just like they did last year. They go to have a drink at the bar, and Bakan tells Sarah that the wedding will be on an island and that a boat will come tomorrow to take them there. Sarah tells her she loves Mauritius because she made beautiful memories there. Bakan asks if she's thinking about settling on the island since she can work online, but Sarah tells her the company needs her in London, even though her voice makes it obvious she's not completely honest. Sarah looks to the side and sees a boat docking, and Jackson steps out with his friends. She's shocked. Bakan tells her that Jackson opened a diving school and is now dating a new girl. Sarah feels nervous about seeing Jackson again after what she did to him, and she also learns she'll see him at the party that night. At the party, Sarah is tense and can't keep her eyes off Jackson. She decides to be brave and go talk to him, but his new girlfriend gets jealous. Jackson responds coldly to Sarah and sides with his new girlfriend. He then decides to leave the party. Sarah follows him and asks him to come back home with her. She manages to soften him with her sweet talk, and the two go to his place for drinks. When they arrive, Sarah tries to flirt with him and even puts on his life jacket. Jackson jokes around with her, and things start to feel better between them. Sarah tries to get closer, but he pushes her away. He tells her he can't stand the idea of her abandoning him again. They start arguing, each one bringing up the other's flaws. But during the fight, Jackson gets close to her, and a gentle moment happens between them. The next morning, Sarah decides to run away and leave him again without saying anything. Bakan calls her and tells her she missed the boat that was supposed to take them to the wedding island. Sarah goes to her elderly friend Freddie's house and asks him to take her on his private plane since he was heading there anyway to deliver the drink crates. Sarah is shocked to learn that Jackson will be riding with them as well. After everything is prepared, the three of them get on the plane. Sarah tries to talk to Jackson, but he ignores her after what she did again. During the flight, Jackson is asleep, and Freddie asks Sarah to sit next to him in the co-pilot seat. They talk about relationships, and Freddie tells her about his wife who died from a serious illness. He says love is very difficult, hinting at her story with Jackson. He tells her he used to give her basic flying lessons before, and he asks her to try flying again. Sarah agrees, and he reminds her of the safety rules. After she understands what to do, she turns off the autopilot to start flying the plane herself. Jackson wakes up and notices a gas cylinder has fallen on the floor. Suddenly, Freddie starts coughing nonstop and goes into violent convulsions, unable to breathe. Jackson rushes to put the cylinder back in place, then hears Sarah screaming, asking for help because Freddie is having a heart attack. They try to give him his pills, but nothing works. Suddenly, Freddie stops moving and collapses onto the control wheel. In that moment, the plane begins to fall, and at the same time the gas cylinder explodes and scratches the front windshield. Jackson quickly moves Freddie aside and takes his seat to control the plane. They were just seconds away from crashing into the ocean, but Sarah manages to save the situation and pull the plane up in time. Jackson tries to perform CPR on Freddie, but unfortunately it's too late, and Freddie dies. Jackson covers his body with his jacket, breaks down crying, then goes to sit in the pilot's seat. He discovers that the GPS system isn't working and they have no idea where they are. There's also no phone they can use to call for help, and their cell phones aren't working either. The two of them try to reach anyone through the radio, but no one responds. Tension rises sharply, and their only hope becomes the autopilot, which is supposed to take them automatically to Rodriguez Island. But they discover that a cylinder has broken, causing a malfunction in both the autopilot and the control system. The situation becomes even worse when they realize that only half the fuel tank is left, and the plane could fall at any moment. Because Frady had taught Sarah a few basics of flying, she realizes they need to move into a safe zone first, and use the compass to determine their direction. Sarah turns the plane 180 degrees, but they're shocked to see a violent storm right in front of them. The plane starts shaking intensely, but Jackson is confident she can get them through the storm at the right moment. At that moment, they finally manage to reach the local air traffic controller, Samuel, and ask for his help. Samuel tells them they must change course immediately because the distance ahead is too long, and their fuel will run out before reaching the destination. To get to the nearest safe landing point, they need to head west, meaning they have to fly straight through the storm. Jackson hates the idea and asks Samuel if landing on the water would be better, but the call cuts out due to the storm's strength. With no other choice, they push forward into the storm. The storm is extremely violent. Lightning flashes around them, and everything turns pitch black. Jackson asks Sarah to switch seats with him and take the main captain's chair so she can see the instruments more clearly. The responsibility weighs heavily on her because of the severe weather, and she must keep the plane stable at the same altitude. But the lightning strikes cause the plane to shake violently, and they struggle to control the instruments. Sarah feels like the plane is going to collapse, so she decides to climb higher and fly above the storm. Tension reaches its peak. Jackson tries to stop her from this crazy idea, but she doesn't listen and continues. Moments later, they find themselves above the storm clouds, where the sky is clear again. But the relief doesn't last long. Frady had warned her not to fly too high because she would get severe altitude dizziness. Suddenly, Sarah starts feeling faint, loses her balance, and passes out. At that moment, the plane begins to dive rapidly and is seconds away from crashing into a hillside. Jackson manages to wake Sarah up, but she's still weak and can't fully stabilize the plane. Luckily, they regain control just in time. The fact that they're still alive is basically a miracle. But because of the bad weather, their compass breaks, and they drift off course. Jackson knows how to make a makeshift compass using simple tools. He takes a magnetic needle and places it in alcohol, and it works. They're able to figure out their current position. Sarah heads west again, and they finally exit the storm without any damage. But now they burned a huge amount of fuel. Sarah notices that one of the tanks is completely empty, so she switches to the other full tank. Even after doing that, the fuel level keeps dropping with no improvement, and they can't figure out why. Jackson tells her he thinks the full tank might have been damaged during the storm, so it isn't working properly. He tries to find any possible solution and decides to go outside the plane himself to see where the problem is coming from. Sarah tries to stop him, but his mind is made up. She knows that without fuel, they will both die, so she reluctantly agrees. Jackson ties himself with a rope and asks Sarah to slow the plane down. Then he carefully climbs out of the aircraft. After countless failed attempts, he finally manages to reach the engine room and discovers that a hole has formed there. He tries to fix it, but suddenly slips and falls. Luckily, he had tied himself to a rope, so he hangs onto the wing of the plane with all his strength despite his injury. Sarah rushes to help him, stabilizes the plane's wheel in one direction, and discovers that his rope got caught in the wheel. She quickly cuts the rope, grabs his hand, and pulls him toward her. After tremendous effort, she finally manages to get him back inside the plane. She checks his arm and finds that it's severely fractured. She treats the open wound first, disinfects it with alcohol, then quickly resets the broken bone before Jackson notices. She places a small piece of wood on his arm and wraps it with cloth. After resting for a bit, they both return to the cockpit and realize that only 5% of the fuel remains. Sarah suggests reducing the plane's weight to save fuel, so she quickly throws out the bags, seats, and anything unnecessary. These items accidentally fall in front of a small boat passing through the sea. Sarah checks the fuel level, but they still aren't making any progress. They both look at Freddie's body, and Sarah makes a very difficult decision. She throws Freddie's body into the sea. She looks at a picture of Freddie with his family, happy and smiling, takes the photo, puts it in his pocket, then lifts his body and drops it from the plane, completely devastated and in tears. She then starts throwing out boxes of alcohol, but suddenly Jackson gets a brilliant idea, using the alcohol as a substitute for fuel. Because of his severe injury, he can't fill the tank himself, so Sarah decides to do it. She gathers her courage, steps outside the plane, climbs to the top, reaches the wing, opens the fuel tank, and begins pouring the alcohol inside while Jackson hands her the bottles. After emptying all of them, she slowly tries to return to the plane. She almost dies, but manages to get back inside safely. Jackson is proud of her and tells her that he found a small island along the path they flew through, and that they can head back and prepare to land there. He tells her they must return immediately because it's their only chance of survival. Sarah agrees since there's no other option, sits in the pilot's seat, and they try to contact anyone, but no one responds. Sarah turns the plane toward the island, but they still can't pinpoint its exact location. Then the worst thing that could happen happens. The fuel runs out completely, and the engine shuts down. The plane starts rising and dropping uncontrollably. Sarah feels like their end is near and apologizes for all the emotional pain she caused. Jackson apologizes too, admitting he was selfish and didn't appreciate her choices. Jackson looks out the window and spots a small island. They both celebrate, and Sarah starts descending toward the ground. But suddenly she loses control because the plane is flying far too low. Jackson tries to contact Sam to tell him they're making an emergency landing. Despite Sarah's enormous effort, the plane crashes into the sea and flips over. Water starts filling the plane until it's completely flooded. Sarah manages to open the plane's door and swims to the surface, but she realizes Jackson isn't with her. She dives back down and finds him unconscious and trapped inside the wing. She swims to the cockpit, grabs a life jacket, puts it around Jackson's neck, and succeeds just before the plane sinks to the bottom of the ocean. She pulls him up to the surface, and they eventually reach the shore, with Jackson still completely unconscious. Sarah keeps performing CPR and rescue breathing until Jackson finally wakes up, coughing and expelling water from his lungs. They rest on the sand, relieved that they survived. Exhausted, they fall asleep on the shore. When they wake up, they find the water rising around them from every direction. Sarah breaks down, panicking, convinced their chances of survival are now extremely low and that they've returned to square one. She looks around desperately for help, but all she sees is the ocean. Suddenly the sand beneath them collapses, and Sarah starts crying, believing she's about to die. They both sink into the water. Jackson completely loses hope and is certain he'll die within hours because of his injury. He begs Sarah to take his life jacket and save herself, insisting he's as good as dead anyway. But Sarah refuses, telling him they're a team, they live together or die together, and promises she won't leave him. Suddenly Jackson's wound reopens, and blood spreads in the water, attracting sharks. At that moment, they confess their love for each other and prepare to die. But just in time, a small rescue boat approaches them after receiving the distress signal. Sarah uses the last of her strength to pull Jackson toward the boat, and they manage to get on board just seconds before the sharks reach them. They talk to each other, promising they'll never be separated again no matter what happens. And that brings us to the end of the film. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.